Have you ever struggled to find stock photos that match your brand's style or look and feel? Or found an image that you love but that just doesn't work with your brand color palette? Or maybe you've tried using filters and one-click AI tools to edit your images, but you've discovered that they're actually pretty time-consuming and the results are sometimes a little over-processed and underwhelming? Well, today I'm going to show you how to take any stock photo or your own images and transform them like a professional to perfectly fit your brand look and feel, using Canva's really impressive and often ignored image editing tools. Specifically, we're going to use the Adjust toolbar, which is a collection of individual tools that are really underestimated and deliver professional looking results. Plus, we're going to talk a little bit about color grading and toning so that you can confidently give your photos a refined, professional look that stands out for the right reasons and helps build a consistent brand image. And I'm going to show you examples of how subtle changes can make the same image work for completely different brands. So grab a cup of coffee or a sneaky glass of wine, get comfy, and let's have a look at the tools and how we can make them work for our specific brand. To access the image editing tools in Canva is really simple. All you do is when you have an image inserted into any Canva design, like this one that I got from Canva stock image library, you just click on the image. And when you do that, in the new glow up, this contextual menu will pop up, and in the older version, a menu will just pop up at the top here, attached to the top bar. And then you're going to click on Edit, and that will pull up your general image editing tools. In a previous video, I looked at some of the Magic Studio tools for image editing, and you can see here, this is where there are filters, effects, apps, etc. But we're going to focus on the more powerful and more professional tools, and we're going to click on this Adjust button here, and it will pull up this Adjust menu. Now this just has a whole range of sliders and we're going to go through them briefly and then I'll show you how they can be used. First of all, you'll notice there's an auto adjust button at the top, but basically all this does is just kind of brighten the image and look for any spots that are too dark or too light and even them out. It can be useful, but it's not particularly powerful, and you can make those changes with these sliders in a way that works better for you anyway. Next, you have a pull-down menu and it says Select Area. Now, this is probably the most important part of these tools, and I think it's so powerful. It basically allows you to select whether you want to just edit the whole image as one thing, or whether you want to differentiate between editing the background and the foreground. And this is really powerful when you're editing a photo that's got people in it, or a particular single product or something like that. It can really make a huge difference and give you a lot more flexibility with this tool. So we'll come back to how that exactly can be used in a few seconds. Next, we have white balance, which basically just adjusts the entire image between a cooler look and a warmer look. And again, these all work better when used subtly, but it shows you how that works. Depending on where your temperature is, you also have a tint in that range. So for example, when it's in the center here in a neutral kind of color range, you have a tint between green and purple, and that will adjust slightly depending on what your temperature is. Generally, I don't really use the tint slider very much at all. I tend to stick to using the temperature slider, and that usually gives me the feel I want. And sometimes I will fine tune a little with the tint slider, but it's probably the lesser one in terms of usefulness for us. Next, you've got all the light sliders, and these are basically just helping with the overall lightness of the image. Brightness just increases the whole brightness of the entire image, and contrast is just used to basically make the difference between light and dark more or less pronounced. So if I take it to the left, everything becomes a little more even. Take it to the right, there is a more pronounced difference between light and dark areas. Highlights takes all the areas in the image that are already brighter and it makes them more bright if you slide it to the right. It's a very subtle change because it's just focusing on the particular areas that are light. Shadows, it's the same thing. It focuses on just the shadow parts of the image, which I can then make more intense or slide it to the right and make them less so. So they're all just little ways of fine-tuning the way that the light and dark in this image is controlled. White is very similar. It looks for areas of white in the image and it will then either make those stronger or weaker, and the same goes for the black slider. To the left makes the blacks more grey, so it gives it a bit more of a washed out view, and to the right you can see it intensifies the black in any of the shadows. Underneath we have the color tools, which are super powerful. You'll see that there's vibrance and saturation. These are very similar, but they're used in different ways. Saturation intensifies or mutes all of the colors in your image. So for example, if I take saturation all the way to the left, the image becomes black and white. All the way to the right, and all colors are more intense. The difference between that and vibrance is that vibrance doesn't remove color if I take it to the left. It just moves all of the colors into a more muted version or mid-tones of that particular color. Again, these can be used for fine-tuning. Saturation is the one I use most, but vibrance can be very good when creating some moody and more subtly colored images. Next, we have a color edit option, and this is super powerful. This is relatively new, but it is probably one of the most useful things, particularly when you want to make something fit for your brand. And what it does is basically pick out specific colors from the image that you're working with, and you can then edit those colors specifically using these sliders. And we'll come back to how that can be used, but it's really, really useful. Next, we have the texture tools, and in all honesty, I don't use these very much. Just so you know, sharpness tends to look for anywhere that there are specific lines or borders, and it intensifies those by sliding the slider. Clarity essentially adds or takes away a bit of a haze. So if I slide it to the left, you'll see everything in this image becomes softer and a little less clear, to the right more so. And it can be really useful, but I don't use it very often. Vignette is actually a very useful tool that can create some lovely effects. And all it does is essentially create a wash of color that's kind of in the corners of the image. So if I slide it to the left, we get a white vignette. If I slide it to the right, we'll get a black vignette. And you'll see that it mainly affects the corners of the photograph. And this can create a very kind of dreamy effect if you're using the white, and to the right creates a more darker, moody effect. Now, if you have any adjustments made and you want to just reset the image, at the bottom of the menu is this Reset Adjustments button, and when we click that, it goes back to the image that we started with. Before we look at how we can take this image and make it work for any brand palette with just a few subtle changes using these tools, if you are finding this tutorial helpful and you like more helpful tips and inspiration, I would really love it if you would join my free weekly email newsletter called Meaningful Creations. I have some really exciting new free resources and some templates in the works, which I'll be sharing alongside my regular weekly content in my newsletter. So if you don't want to miss out on any of that, just head to the link that's on the screen right now or in the description below the video, and you can join over 3,500 people who I get to chat to every week. Okay, so let's get back to our image editing. I've just put a color palette here for an imaginary brand, and it fits perfectly with this image. The one thing I would be very cautious about with editing any images like this is if there is a color that is close to skin tone, like on the right-hand side here, you'll see it's picked out this color, which is very much aligned with this model's skin tone. If I click on that, you have to be super careful about changing those kind of tones in any photograph. If I slide this even a little to the left, you'll see how the model's skin tone becomes really unnatural. So any changes that affect skin tone should be really carefully avoided. And that's where it is so helpful that we can choose between editing the background and the foreground or the whole image. Let's say for another brand, we had also similar colors. We had blues and grays and a black, but we wanted something that had a bit more of a moody brand palette. So it's a lot darker. It feels just a lot more moody, and we want to change this image to reflect that. It's pretty close already, but if I click on that and then go to those adjust tools, I can start making some really subtle adjustments that fit with this brand palette. So I want it to be a little more moody, but I want to keep the model in focus. So I'm going to choose to edit the background. And the first thing I'm going to do is to take down the brightness of background. So you'll see it's just the background that's being adjusted, and I'm taking it down so that it starts to match the darker colors of this brand palette. I can adjust the contrast. So taking the contrast down gives us more of a gray kind of feel to the background and makes everything a little less bright. And then I could play with any of these other sliders, maybe to lift the highlights a little so that the model stands out a bit more. And I could just adjust and play with these so that I get something that's closer to what I want. Now this is where I could use something like a vignette, because I want this to be moody and I just want the model to kind of stand out. I can increase the vignette to the right-hand side, giving us a little bit of a black corner wash. And you can see it just darkens that image and, again, like I say, makes it feel moody but still features the model. Now, while the blue works, I'd like something that makes a closer reference to the brand color palette in terms of her jacket colors. So I'm going to go back to the top and I'm going to choose the whole image. And then when I scroll down, it will have those colors that it's picked from the image. It's obviously picked this blue from her jacket. And so when I click on that, it now gives me some options to edit that blue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and match it to this brand color palette a little more. So the first thing I'll do is I'll take the brightness down so that it's a little darker. Then I'll play with the saturation and the brightness to see how I can get a color that is a little closer to the brand color that's in the bottom of this palette here. Now you can see those changes are really subtle. The image doesn't look like a lot has been done to it. But if we go back to the previous one and the previous color palette, it does have a different look and feel which would work for your brand. Now let's try something that's a little more extreme. If we click on this slide, you'll see that I've added some other color palettes at the bottom here. This one is a little more summery, it's got more of a turquoise feel to it, and it's definitely a lot brighter, although there are a couple of darker colors which tie in with this image kind of nicely. So if I click on the image again and go back to those adjust tools, the first thing that I want to do is to change the temperature of the whole image to being a little cooler with a little more of a blue wash. So I'm going to slide the temperature to the left, and you'll see how everything starts to get a little bluer. I want to be kind of subtle with this. I don't want it all the way to the left so that it appears unnatural. I'm just going to move it so that the background particularly has more of a blue wash, and then I'm going to select the background from the select area menu, and I'm also going to tone that down a little more so we don't mess too much with the skin color, but we are changing it a little. And I'm going to use the tint slider a little bit to the left so that we add a little more green for a little more of a turquoise wash on the background. Now already that feels like it matches this a little better, but I'm going to go back to whole image, and again we're going to use the jacket as a way of tying in the brand palette. I'm going to move the hue slider to the left till I get more of a turquoise, and then I can play with saturation and brightness so that I can check that it starts to look like a natural wash rather than something that's maybe a little too intense. And there you go, just with a few adjustments you can see how that now fits perfectly with that brand palette, but the changes are actually quite subtle and it doesn't look unnatural. So if I go back to the previous ones, you'll see that's darker and warmer. That one is very normal and kind of average light. And this one is a little brighter and it's got more of a turquoise feel to the whole thing. But, I hear you say, what if it's something that doesn't use blues? Well, we can still use these tools and adjust the image to fit if we really want to use this image. So for the next one, I've actually used colors out of my brand palette. Now, my brand palette is a lot more muted and it has a lot of colors that really are not very bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on the image again, and we're going to play around with adjustments to make it fit with this palette. Now you can see immediately the green is a lot more muted and there is green in this image. So what I'm going to do is select the background, and I'm going to go down to my saturation and vibrance tools, and I'm going to adjust those so that I get more of a muted green in this image. And the background, as you can see, has desaturated a little more and is starting to match these neutral tones in the brand palette. As I said before, I don't want to mess with her skin tone. That's really important to me, so I'm not going to try and adjust that too much. But once again, I am going to try and use her jacket as a focal point to tie in my brand colors. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to use the hue slider to get more of a yellow or gold feel to the jacket. Once there's something that's vaguely close to what I want, I'm then going to use the saturation and brightness sliders again to tone it down to get us something closely fitting the color that's beneath it in this brand color palette. Now that's not 100%, but that is very close. And you can see how this image now immediately has a more muted feel. It feels like something I could drop into one of my materials really easily, and it doesn't look unnatural. Even when you look at the original version of the image, this edited version still feels natural and doesn't look like too much has been done to it. And lastly, we can do the same thing even using really bright colors. So if I follow the exact same process for something like this, I'm going to select the background of the image and I'm going to change it to a warmer color behind to tie in with the orange that we've got in the palette. I need, again, to be careful that it doesn't look too unrealistic, but I think that still ties in with the orange and makes it warmer without looking artificial or fake. Next, I'm going to go to the whole image, scroll down, and I'm going to again play with the jacket. And this time it will be very noticeable because we're going to slide the slider for hue all the way until we get a kind of red-pink color. And you can see that now, once again, we can play with saturation and we can play with brightness to get something that feels like it matches the brand color palette. And there with just a few clicks, we already have an image that matches this brand color palette, but doesn't look artificial and doesn't look like we've had to add a filter that changes the entire image and looks really weird. All of these images would work and don't look artificial, don't look over-processed, and could work for these brand color palettes in their materials. Overall, the key to making any of these images work using these adjust sliders as part of the image editing tools is to play around with subtle changes until you get the result that you want, but make sure that it stays natural. And as I said before, make sure that you're careful about skin tone in any of the images. So with just a few tweaks using Canva's Adjust tools, you can turn pretty much any photo into a perfect match for your brand without it looking artificial or amateurish. Now remember, while filters can seem to be the quick solution, the control and precision that you get from manually adjusting your images can really help to take your visuals to the next level, and sometimes in way less time than it takes to get AI tools to work the way you want them to. That's it folks, thanks for watching, keep creating, and have a fabulous week. Peace.